The snow had been falling for 3 days straight, transforming the mountain roads into treacherous white corridors that seemed to lead nowhere. Marcus Chin gripped the steering wheel of his truck tighter, squinting through the windshield as the wipers fought a losing battle against the accumulating ice. His daughter Emma sat in the back seat, her small face pressed against the window, watching the world disappear into white. They were supposed to be home an hour ago. The wedding reception Marcus had been photographing had run late, and now the storm that the meteorologists had underestimated was proving them all fools. Emma was only 6, and though she hadn't complained once, Marcus could see the worry creeping into her eyes. He'd been a single father for 2 years now, ever since his wife Sarah had died in a car accident, and every decision he made felt weighted with the responsibility of being both parents to this little girl who meant everything to him. The road curved sharply ahead, and Marcus slowed the truck to a crawl. That's when he saw it, a flash of white fabric against white snow, barely distinguishable except for the unnatural shape of it, the way it lay crumpled at the edge of the embankment. For a moment, he thought it was just his tired eyes playing tricks, but then the fabric moved. Marcus pulled the truck to the side, his heart hammering. He turned to Emma with what he hoped was a reassuring smile and told her to stay put, doors locked, heat running. Then he grabbed his emergency kit and pushed out into the howling wind. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. He trudged through knee-deep snow toward the white shape, and as he got closer, his stomach dropped. It was a woman in a wedding dress, the elaborate gown now torn and filthy, soaked through with snow and mud. She was curled on her side, her dark hair plastered to her face, her lips tinged blue. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his photographer's hands, so used to capturing life, now searching desperately for signs of it. He found a pulse, weak and thready, and felt a surge of relief so intense it made him dizzy. The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glassy, before closing again. She mumbled something incoherent, and Marcus knew he had maybe minutes before hypothermia claimed her completely. He didn't think. He simply acted. Scooping her into his arms, he was struck by how light she felt, how fragile. He carried her back to the truck, yanking open the passenger door and settling her as gently as he could into the seat. Emma's eyes went wide with shock and questions, but Marcus was already stripping off his heavy winter coat and wrapping it around the shivering woman, cranking the heat as high as it would go. The drive down the mountain was the longest 40 minutes of Marcus's life. He kept one hand on the wheel and one on the woman's wrist, monitoring her pulse, talking to her constantly even though she didn't respond, telling her to hold on, that help was coming, that she was going to be okay. Emma, bless her heart, started singing softly from the back seat, one of the lullabies Sarah used to sing, and Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. At the hospital, everything became a blur of emergency room personnel and urgent voices and forms to sign. Marcus gave them what little information he had, none, really, except that he'd found her on Mountain Pass Road, that she'd been wearing a wedding dress, that she'd been alone. The nurses whisked her away, and Marcus was left standing in the harsh fluorescent lighting with Emma's small hand in his, both of them still in their formal clothes from the wedding he'd photographed, both of them shaking from more than just the cold. They stayed at the hospital for hours. Marcus told himself it was just to make sure she was okay, to give a proper statement to the police who arrived to take his report, but truthfully, he couldn't bring himself to leave. Some instinct he couldn't name kept him rooted to that uncomfortable plastic chair in the waiting room, Emma curled up asleep against his side. It was nearly dawn when a doctor finally came out. The woman was stable, the doctor said. Severe hypothermia, some frostbite on her fingers and toes, dehydration, and signs of physical trauma consistent with a fall or struggle, but she would survive. She'd been conscious briefly and had given them a name, Lily Morrison. She had no identification, no phone, no way to contact anyone. When the police had asked her what happened, she'd simply turned her face to the wall and refused to speak. Marcus should have gone home then. He should have taken Emma back to their warm house and their normal life and forgotten about the woman in the wedding dress. But he didn't. He came back the next day, and the day after that. He brought flowers from the hospital gift shop and books he thought someone might want to read. He never went into her room, just left the gifts at the nurse's station with instructions to give them to the patient in room 304. On the fourth day, Lily asked to see him. The nurse led Marcus to her room, where he found a woman who looked nothing like the half-frozen bride he'd pulled from the snow. She was sitting up in bed, her dark hair clean and brushed, her face still pale but no longer that terrifying shade of blue. Her eyes, he noticed for the first time, were a deep brown, warm despite everything, and they were fixed on him with an intensity that made him pause in the doorway. She thanked him for saving her life. Her voice was quiet, rough from disuse, but steady. Marcus waved off the thanks awkwardly, said anyone would have done the same, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true. There was a long silence, and then Lily began to talk. She'd been engaged to a man named Richard, she told him. Wealthy, charismatic, controlling. She hadn't seen the warning signs until it was too late, until the engagement had been announced and the wedding planned and her whole life had been absorbed into his. On their wedding day, she'd finally understood that if she walked down that aisle, she would lose herself completely. So she'd run. Taken off in her wedding dress with nothing but her need to escape. Her car had slid off the road in the storm, and she'd walked for miles in the blizzard before collapsing where Marcus had found her. She had no family, she said. No close friends who hadn't sided with Richard and his money and his influence. She had nowhere to go and no resources to get there. As she spoke, Marcus saw not fragility but strength, the kind of courage it took to choose uncertainty over a certain kind of death of the spirit. What happened next surprised Marcus as much as anyone. He offered her a job. His photography business was growing, and he needed someone to help with scheduling, client management, basic editing. He could offer room and board, a small salary to start, a chance to rebuild. It was impulsive and possibly foolish, but something in his gut told him it was right. Lily stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. Then, to his alarm, she began to cry, not the delicate tears he'd seen in countless wedding photos he'd taken over the years, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone who'd forgotten what kindness felt like. She accepted his offer. When she was released from the hospital a week later, Marcus picked her up and drove her to the home he and Emma had made in the 2 years since Sarah's death. It was a modest house on the edge of town, with a spare bedroom that had been serving as storage and an office. Emma, who'd been told they were having a house guest, greeted Lily with the unguarded curiosity of children and asked if she was a princess since she'd been wearing a fancy dress. Lily laughed, and it was the first genuine sound of joy Marcus had heard from her. She knelt down to Emma's level and said no, she wasn't a princess, just someone who'd gotten lost and been lucky enough to be found by good people. The first weeks were an adjustment. Lily moved through the house like a ghost, quiet and careful, as if afraid to take up space. She threw herself into work, learning Marcus's systems with an efficiency that impressed him, bringing an organization to his chaotic business that he hadn't realized he desperately needed. She was good with clients, professional but warm, and she had an eye for composition that made her feedback on his photos genuinely valuable. But it was with Emma that the real transformation began. The little girl, who'd been so withdrawn after losing her mother, began to open up. Lily never tried to replace Sarah, never overstepped, but she was present in a way Marcus, juggling work and single parenthood, sometimes struggled to be. She helped with homework and made elaborate breakfasts, and sat through endless repetitions of Emma's dance routines with genuine interest. Marcus watched this unfold with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something he wasn't ready to name. He noticed the way Lily laughed at Emma's jokes, really laughed, throwing her head back with abandon. He noticed how she'd started humming while she worked, how color had returned to her cheeks, how she'd begun to look less like someone running from something and more like someone running toward a life. Winter gave way to spring, and with the thaw came change. Lily's confidence grew. She started taking on more responsibilities, suggesting marketing strategies for the business, even picking up a camera herself and discovering a talent for candid photography that complemented Marcus's more formal style. She and Emma planted a garden together, and Marcus would come home to find them both dirt-smudged and giggling, talking about tomatoes and sunflowers with the seriousness of scientists. It was on one of those spring evenings, watching Lily and Emma working in the garden while he prepared dinner, that Marcus realized he'd fallen in love. The realization didn't come with fanfare or drama. It was quiet, certain, like coming home after a long journey. He loved the way Lily sang off-key while she worked. He loved her fierce protectiveness of Emma. He loved how she made their house feel like a home again, not by erasing Sarah's memory but by adding new warmth, new light, new life. But he didn't say anything. How could he? She'd come to them broken, seeking safety, not romance. He was her employer, her rescuer. The power dynamics were all wrong. So he kept his feelings locked away and tried to be content with what they had, this strange little family they built from catastrophe and kindness. It was Lily who finally broke the silence between them. On a warm June evening, after Emma had gone to bed, she found Marcus on the back porch, editing photos. She sat down beside him, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and light. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lily said quietly that she'd been thinking about the day he found her in the snow. She'd been so close to giving up, she told him. The cold had been almost welcoming, a peaceful surrender. But then he'd appeared, this stranger who'd stopped in a blizzard, who'd risked his own safety, who'd refused to let her go. He'd given her more than rescue, she said. He'd given her a reason to believe that good people existed, that life could be different, that she deserved more than she'd been settling for. Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached out and took her hand. It was the first time they'd touched beyond the professional, the polite, and the contact sent electricity up his arm. Lily's fingers intertwined with his, and she turned to look at him with those warm brown eyes, and in them he saw his own feelings reflected back. They took it slow, both of them carrying scars, both of them afraid of breaking something precious. But love, Marcus was learning, didn't always arrive with warning. Sometimes it crept in during ordinary moments, in shared laughter over burnt pancakes, in the way someone sang your daughter to sleep, in the quiet competence of building a life together one day at a time. A year after he'd found her in the snow, Marcus and Lily were married in their backyard garden, the one she and Emma had planted together. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and Emma, who served as both flower girl and ring bearer with solemn importance. Lily wore a simple sundress instead of an elaborate gown, and she cried happy tears when Marcus promised to love her, not to save her, because she'd already saved herself. As Marcus looked at his new wife and his beaming daughter, both of them lit by the golden light of late afternoon, he thought about chance and choice, about how sometimes the worst storms bring unexpected gifts. He'd set out into a blizzard to photograph a wedding and had come home with something he never expected, a second chance at love. A whole person who'd been willing to choose the uncertain kindness of strangers over the certain cruelty of the familiar. Lily had taught him that rescue wasn't a one-time act but a daily choice, and that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. They'd both been lost in different ways, and they'd found each other in the snow, two broken people building something whole, something warm, something that felt like coming home after a long, cold journey through the dark.